Welcome back, everyone, to Neuroalchemy, where science meets soul and where healing, learning, and growth are understood as multidimensional, intuitive, and deeply human processes. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Young. Here on Neuroalchemy, we slow things down. We define every term as if you're hearing it for the very first time because clarity creates safety and safety opens the door to new healing possibilities. Today's conversation touches on creativity, performance, failure, and the nervous system. If you've ever felt stuck, discouraged, or not good enough while learning something new, this episode is for you. You're invited to listen gently. Pause if you need to. Nothing here requires perfection. Today, I'm joined by Patrick. Remind me how to pronounce your last name. Is it Boylan?
Yes, Boylan.
Yay! And I'm really glad to welcome him to Neuroalchemy. I know, you guys, it's just so important to me that I pronounce people's names properly. It's like one of those little things about me it's just really important. Patrick is a professional pianist, a creative technologist, and the co-founder of MuseFlow, an innovative music education platform designed to help learners drop into flow rather than getting stuck in perfectionism or performance pressure. Patrick's work is the intersection of music, neuroscience, art, and self-directed learning. What I appreciate most about his perspective is how it challenges many of the ways we've been taught to think about failure, effort, and growth. His story offers a different narrative. That struggle doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Often it means you're learning. Patrick, I'm really glad you're here. Welcome to Neuroalchemy.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely. I appreciate your flexibility. We have rescheduled this 3 times. And so thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely, Patrick. Life happens. That's just the nature of being alive, is that things come up and life happens.
Yeah.
Before we dive in, I always like to have just an arrival check-in. How's your day been going? How's life going? How are you arriving with us today?
Pretty good. Pretty good. It's a Friday. At least, when we're recording this. I'm doing pretty well. I'm looking forward to the weekend. I've got a solid packed weekend and it's beautiful out. I mean, I don't, where are you exactly?
Ann Arbor.
Hello. Yes. Okay. Right. And I'm in Los Angeles. And so it is a beautiful 70 degrees out and it's probably going to get up to about not 80 today. So it's a beautiful day out in Los Angeles, especially compared to Ann Arbor. How you doing?
I mean, I'm a little jealous of your weather. Of
Yeah.
course, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, there's lots of snow on the ground. I don't love the winters here, but it's a beautiful state and I love the people here. Thank you for sharing that, Patrick. There's no right way to arrive here to everyone out there. However, you're showing up today with us is enough. Before we go deeper into your story, Patrick, I'd love to ground a few core ideas that we'll be returning to throughout our conversation. For our listeners, how would you define flow state, especially in the context of learning music or creative skills?
Flow state is that groove that you find where you are just learning and growing and you're right there in that pocket of you're not being too frustrated by the process or what you're learning or you're not bored. You're right there. You're engaged in the present and you lose track of time. And there's a couple things that you need to get there, but that's ultimately what we feel is this groove of progress and joy at the same time.
How do you understand failure, not as a personal flaw, but as part of the learning process and the nervous system's adaptation?
It's inevitable. Failure is a part of the learning process. Not gonna grow unless you fail. It's as simple as that. It's the only way we learn. How else could you consider? I can't conceive of any other way that we learn as beings besides repeated failure over and over and over. And so if we can reframe it that way and destigmatize it, it is not a failure on your end. It is not a personal flaw that you are failing over and over and over. If we can incorporate this into the learning process in a very organic, non-judgmental way, it simply is, then I think we've succeeded as pedagogists, as people that create curricula and methods of learning. If we can destigmatize failure, I think that is a massive goal for us.
I think it's really important. I often tell my clients that nothing you've ever, and this is very true, nothing you've ever learned to do in your entire life did you get it right the first time. Nothing.
No.
Not
Heck no.
walking, not
Right.
riding a bike, not doing a recipe, learning to cook, vacuuming a room. Like it doesn't matter what you call out, you did not get it right the first time. So I think it's so important that we're having this conversation. It's so important that we call that out. What is self directed learning and how does it differ from traditional instruction models?
We know the term autodidacts, people that love to learn on their own outside of curricula. They like to create their own curricula. They like to create their own way of learning. And I think that is really, really cool. And so self directed learning is that process of digesting information, learning it, and then applying it on your own outside of the environments of a school or a classroom. There may be a teacher involved, but you're the one that's kind of in charge of how you want to progress in your pace. This isn't something that is, we're not punching down here. This is right at what you want, right? This is not all common denominators here. No, we are not creating a curricula for everybody. No, this is specifically for you, right? And I think that is, if you're one of those people that are internally motivated and create your own environments for learning, I think that's really cool. Some people need the guided curricula. Some people need the teacher. They need the external motivation. And that is also very okay. But in this context, self-directed learning is when you're taking it on yourself saying, I really want to learn this, learning it, and then applying it.
How do you define performance pressure and what does it take? What does it do to creativity in the brain?
Oh my gosh, performance pressure. There's a lot that goes into it. Many different elements, right? We've got the audience's perception of how you're doing, what you're playing. It is your own self internal monitoring of how you're doing, how you're playing, right? And then also your execution of it. What is the truth here? It's all very variable and it's all very colored by your own experience and what you perceive the audience is experiencing. And so if you can all of those together into one, you ball that up and you put it as a sort of metric of what you need to accomplish during the moment of performance, then that, in my mind, is what performance anxiety is and what performance pressure is. You're saying this is a standard of what I need to accomplish as a performer. And if you don't meet it, 90% of the time, you're not going to meet it. Just full disclosure. 90%, you're probably not going to meet your own personal standards. And so that is one of those things that I try to mitigate as much as possible. It is very difficult for me to. Having my own sort of judgment on my own experience of performing and what I think the audience needs and what they want. Yeah, it's very difficult. That sort of performance anxiety and performance pressure.
And finally, curiosity based learning. Why does curiosity matter so much for long term growth and confidence?
Long-term growth and confidence. I think if you're not curious about what you're learning, you can never really dive deep enough into it. You've got to have that internal motivation, right? You got to be curious about the topic at hand. And if you're not, then like it's all just going to wash over and you're not going to really digest it or internalize it in any possible way. So long-term growth and long-term satisfaction, it comes from being curious in the moment and going through your own curricula or your own experience of what you want to learn and how you want to learn it, or following the curricula itself and being absolutely engaged with the process and the method and the teacher and the information. If you're not curious in the moment, you're not going to find that fulfillment later.
Thank you for slowing that down. This shared language really helps us to set the tone. Now that we've grounded that, I'd love to turn toward your personal journey. You've shared that you actually grew up hating piano lessons and that
Yeah.
traditional instruction did not work for you. Can you walk us through what wasn't working and what eventually did?
I took 8 years of lessons and I hated every second of it, sorry to say. I started off when I was 8 and we had a piano in our home and I asked my parents for piano lessons and they said, "You know, Pat, it's a lifelong hobby." And I said, I'm so excited. Let's do it. Absolutely. Of course. No problem at all. Lifelong hobby. What did I know about a lifelong hobby when I was 8? Right. Got into lessons and I promptly did not enjoy either the way that I was being taught, well, both the way that I was being taught and what I was being taught. The sort of rote memorization of songs and learning the new skills that you need to learn to grow within the context of one specific song, and then repeating that to perfection, and then bringing that back to your teacher, and then them either checking it off or saying, no, you got to go practice that same song again. It's just like that doesn't work for my brain, right? I was late stage diagnosed with ADHD, and I'm just like, nope, sorry. That type of learning doesn't work for my brain. Turns out it doesn't work for 85% of music students either. They're either super frustrated with, here's the key importance, they're frustrated with the way that they're being taught, or they're bored with the way that they're being taught. The frustration comes from learning harder and harder songs as you go. And you're learning the skills that are necessary to play within the context of those songs, yes, but you're not learning how to apply that to other songs outside of the context of that one specific song. That's a failure in traditional pedagogy. And so they're very frustrated because they're learning harder and harder songs. And all you're doing is learning how to practice songs at that point. You're not learning the fundamentals and then being able to apply that to another song. Or they're very bored because they're playing songs they don't want to learn, right? They're going into a curricula and their teacher gives them all these songs that they need to learn in progression. And they're all very boring. I'm sorry to say, but they're not interesting. And it doesn't work for a lot of people because of that. It's not that they don't want to learn. It's that the way that we're being taught doesn't really jive with them. Anyway, I then ended up, my teacher retired, no fault of my own. Well, granted, I was a terrible student, but he just retired. And I then started my own self-directed learning after that. I picked up my parents' sheet music and I was determined to play the song verbatim, right? They had a bunch of musical theater scores. And so I played it, I just note by note by note by note, played this one specific song, right? And then I found a little phrase that I really enjoyed, whether that was a melody or a rhythmic pattern. I just seemed to really enjoy it. And then I ended up just closing the book and improvising around that phrase. I put that phrase in all these different musical contexts. I put it in the right hand. I put it in the left hand. I flipped it. I inverted it. I played it backwards, slowed it down, sped it up, all the different keys, all the different time signatures. I broke it up into different rhythmic patterns. And then I really enjoyed it. I really fleshed it out and played it in all these different contexts. And so then I just kept doing that over and over and over. That was where I really learned how to play. Because then cut to college, I was the only acting major that could play piano. And all of the musical theater students are coming up to me being like, Pat, I want to practice this song. I want to practice this song. And I'm like, okay, throw it in front of me. Let's see if I can do it. Lo and behold, I could actually play that song. I'd never seen that song in my life, but I could play the notes relatively well and the patterns relatively well because I had seen those notes and those patterns in those relatively same kind of patterns and situations. And, they were brought together line by line. I saw those in other songs that I had taken the core principles, those little phrases, and I had strung them together. That was really how I learned how to play, is that self-direction.
So, what shifted when learning became something you could explore rather than something you just had to perform?
Well, it really worked for my brain. It wasn't learning songs by rote. It was learning the fundamentals, these key phrases that were repeated in other songs. I was learning the fundamentals outside the context of one specific song. And so I was able to, when seeing it in another song, actually play that little phrase connected to a different little pattern, because music is constantly repeating itself across all genres. We have little core rudiments, little core phrases that are constantly showing up, little patterns or little melodies that are constantly showing up in other songs. It's just about how you connect them that's different. And so if I saw that repeated in another song, I was able to play it because I had practiced that in all these different contexts in my self-directed improvisations, right? And so that right there, that type of method of learning is something I was really curious about when I came out to Los Angeles. I was 5 years of acting. I'm not the best actor, but I tried my best. And then after 5 years, I was really depressed. I was still waiting tables. And my wife she's like, Pat, go play piano. What are you doing? You've been doing it your entire life. Go play. And so lo and behold, I did. 3 months later, I got my first accompaniment gig at a school here in just 20 minutes east of where I'm at. And then I got a piano bar. I got a background jazz gig at a restaurant. I got another background jazz gig. And then there you go. I was actually making my living off of playing piano. I was bored one day and I was like, well, look, if I can do this, sure, I learned the basics in lessons, but if I can teach the basics somehow the way that I taught myself, maybe there's something there. Maybe I can create a curriculum for other people to try. And that's ultimately what MuseFlow is, right? And so sending it out to the world, and it's turning out to be really cool. People are liking it.
One thing you speak about so clearly that we talked about a little bit earlier is the idea that failure isn't the end of learning. It's often the only way that we actually are able to learn. From your perspective, what's happening in the brain and then the nervous system when people feel stuck, discouraged, or ashamed while learning something new? And how does shame interrupt learning? And how does safety restore it?
I think the biggest thing that we need to kind of reframe here is perfection. Failure is only a part of the learning process if you consider perfection to be the end goal, right? Yeah, you're playing the wrong note, but that's fine. It's called the blues, right? You play a blue note. That's okay. You just got to keep playing. Do you know how many times I mess up at my piano bar when I'm playing? I have a 2-hour shift, right? And I probably mess up around 300 times. But I got to just keep going because I'm entertaining a crowd. I just got to keep playing. It's not about what I'm playing. It's about how I'm playing it. It's about if I can communicate the idea of a song to other people. That sort of reframe of what is good and what is bad, or what is right and what is wrong. It's not about the notes you're playing. It's about how you're playing it. And so what happens in the nervous system when you feel like you're just messing up constantly? What happens is your heart rate spikes, your adrenaline goes through the roof, you start self-monitoring, which is just never good for creativity, and you clam up. You start to mess up over and over and over and over, and then you just totally deteriorate into not being able to even produce a single note at the end of that process. And so it's not about the notes you play. It's not. That's why we don't require 100% accuracy in MuseFlow. We require 95% accuracy. Proficiency is really where it's at, you know? And so what happens nervous system wise is just all of those emotions, the fear of failure because of perfectionism, our adrenaline spikes, heart rate goes through the roof, our breathing stops, and then we just clam up and we can't continue. That's what happens. And it's just so unfortunate to see people like that. You got to keep telling people, breathe, relax. Don't worry about it. It's not about if you're doing it wrong or right. There's no reason for that,
Many people quit music, art, or other creative pursuits for that very reason because they feel like they're bad at it. Perfectionism, talk a little bit more about how that interferes with flow.
If we think, there's a classic saying, right? Perfectionism kills creativity. Because if we're trying to create the perfect thing, first off, that's not even real. What is perfect? That's such an esoteric concept that you can't even define, right? And perfect it's so based on interpretation. My idea of perfection, it could be very different than your idea of perfection. right? Say a song is called Frolic Through the Forest or something, right? And it's written do, 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 right? Very kind of bouncy, very fun. To me, that's frolicking, is this sort of bouncing kind of feel, right? You're frolicking. You're kind of skipping about through a forest and you're wandering that way. But maybe your idea of frolicking is more legato. Maybe it's more of a curiosity, right? Maybe that's how you interpret that song versus how I interpret that song. So perfection in that regard is pointless because it's so based on context. It's so based on personal preference. I would try your best to just not even think about what perfect is and just think about what your truth is and how you want to explore that song. Now, when you go into such, again, esoteric concepts of like how you want to interpret that song, that drives you down into the present. That allows you to ground yourself in something that is really just simply tactile and not real, or it's just you playing it and you exploring a song and expressing yourself. That's the key to flow when it comes to any sort of performance, in my opinion. It is expression. And how do you do that? Through your instrument. An instrument is simply a way to translate an idea from one medium to the next. And it is a way to express yourself, right? If you can think about it that way, that will allow you to really drop into flow because all you're doing is just finding the truth of what it means to you, not trying to find this perfect way of playing it. That's not musical. That's not fun.
What changes in the brain and nervous system when people are allowed to experiment, make mistakes, and stay curious?
Your heart rate drops. You get into the flow and the rhythm of whatever you're playing, right? And your heart rate follows that. And your body and mind follow that. You start to sway. You start to go into a trance, a sort of meditation in a way, right? And then it becomes something very emotional for you too. You can express yourself through that instrument. So number one, your heart rate drops. You fall into this meditation. You then can tap into emotion. If you're clammed up, if you're all anxiety driven and you're not breathing, that doesn't allow you to tap into your river of creativity that's underneath you. And a lot of artists talk about that river. You can call it God. Bach called it God. Divine inspiration. He was able to tap into that, right? Taylor Swift and Paul McCartney talk about it as a river, and they're building the well down into that river of creativity every time that they try to write a song or play a song. They're building that well. And then soon enough, that well is super fortified so that it's just so easy to drop a bucket down there, grab a little bit of water and pull it back up. Exercise that sort of well of dripping down into the creativity of the river of creativity. What helps with that is relaxation, breathing, lowering your heart rate, dropping into the present, and finding that flow for yourself. Flow is so personal. It just depends on what you enjoy.
Absolutely. MuseFlow was born directly out of your lived experience. Can you share a little bit about how your unconventional learning path shaped the way that MuseFlow is designed and what makes it different from traditional music education models?
I'm not here to like proselytize MuseFlow. I'm here to talk about like the methodology and like what's different about like why it worked for me and how it worked for me, and maybe it'll work for you. A lot of people do flourish in the traditional ways of learning, but there are other ways if it failed for you. And we're just one option, right? The engine of my personal curriculum was improvisation. That's what the engine of my curriculum. I put all of the core concepts inside of an improvisation. But ours in MuseFlow is what is called sight reading, the act of reading music at first sight. So we give you a new note or a new rhythm, a new concept, a new time signature, a new way to move about the piano, however it may be. We teach you harmony this way. We teach you what is called polyphony, multiple notes at one time. We teach you monophony, of course. And then we teach you rests, like we teach you slurs. We teach you everything, right? We can teach you everything in this type of sight reading first curriculum. So here's how it works. What we give you is a new note or a new concept, whatever it may be, inside of an interactive tutorial. So it's called just-in-time learning. It's where we give you the new concept and then you immediately apply it. Immediately. And you get immediate feedback on that too. And so you're able to iterate really fast. You learn it just a little bit, and then we get you into the sight reading level. The sight reading level is just a bunch of music that is not a song, but it's beautiful. There's a melody to it. There's accompaniment. They're all handwritten. A lot of it is algorithmically generated, and then we hand mock them up on like after that. If it needs a little tweak here and there to create a melody or an up and down or a nice little pattern or a chord progression or whatnot, yeah, we finagle them. Every single one of them is handpicked, and so we connect those phrases of music. We connect them through a little bit of algorithm and a little bit of logic. And so we let you go. We just have you play at your level. It's music that you've never seen before that never repeats. And you just go. You get into that flow and you got to play it. If it's too hard, lower the tempo. If it's too easy, raise the tempo. Or go on to another level. Go to a harder level. We're going to automate all this later. Right, where we adjust the tempo and adjust the complexity automatically. But right now, 27 levels. And we teach you 14 notes. And we teach you polyphony, which is harmony. Anyway, you get into that sight reading level. You play. You're learning, you're growing. It's adapting, you're adapting. You're enjoying that connection. And then you start to get better. Or you have to lower the tempo first, and then you start getting better. You start getting better and you're playing, and you're then get 95% accuracy. You're playing at 95% accuracy at the goal tempo. You play that 4 phrases in a row at 95% accuracy, and then boom, you pass the level. What's happening here is it's not a linear progression. It is stair steps. You're going, and then you learn, you feel that the neurons actually connecting in your brain. You can actually, I don't know if you've ever noticed a moment where that has happened for you. I have, where I've learned something new and now I'm actually I can get it. I actually get it, right? That stair step happens. The neurons connect and you start playing at proficiency. 95% accuracy, 4 phrases in a row. You're getting it. You're actually getting it. Boom, you pass the level. Big dopamine hit happens. So we're gamifying the learning process here. We're not just extra stars or anything like that. No. It's like truly an internal feeling of like progress. Yeah. All the while you're playing completely new, never repeating music. So that's how we do it. And that's a very like one-to-one direct parallel between the way that I taught myself and how we're teaching you guys through sight reading.
Although MuseFlow is rooted in music, what you're describing feels much bigger than piano lessons. How do these ideas about failure, about learning, about flow apply to entrepreneurship, personal growth, and everyday life?
Hmm. Interesting. I don't know if one must find flow in their everyday life, in my opinion. If you're going to live a creative life, creative meaning like you're going to create something, and an entrepreneur is creating something. And so they are inherently creative. They're breaking boundaries. They're doing something new, right? If you're going to live a creative life, you got to find flow within your creativity. Otherwise, it's no fun. Why are you doing it? Enjoy the process of life. Don't find external validation, find internal validation, and enjoy the process of doing and learning and growing rather than the end goal. Yeah, you're trying to build something, you know? Yes, of course you're trying to build something. But if you're not enjoying the process, what's the point? What's the point? Millions of dollars is not worth it if you're not enjoying the process. So I think you got to try to find a way to hack your own life. Try to find a way to find your own flow. Set up your environment so that it's more conducive to that. I also think that these kind of concepts, flow state, personalization of education, finding like destigmatizing failure, I want to talk about it more in a context of simply learning other subjects too. Simply education as a whole. What does that look like? How is that possible? We've done it in music education. Pretty cool that we've been able to do it there. But how does this concept of just-in-time learning, flow state, personalization, destigmatizing failure, letting that be a part of the learning process, how does that translate to other subjects? I'd be very curious to talk with other pedagogists about that.
I think it absolutely ties right into learning anything because what you're describing, it's all about the process of learning and the way that the brain, goes through that process to make those new neurons and pathways in the brain. I think it's a matter of how would you do it in the different avenues. It's not a matter of does it, it's just how would you modify it, right?
Right.
For different topics or different things. Where do you see people holding themselves back unnecessarily?
Something I see in I don't want to call him out, but my dad. I do see this in my dad, unfortunately. Undiagnosed ADHD, doesn't have any sort of methods of overcoming it. What he gets stuck in is that perfection. He really does. He gets stuck in the learning cycle and then rarely gets into the execution cycle. He gets stuck in the, I'm going to learn everything about something. I'm going to get obsessed with this and I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. I'm going to learn. But there's no reason to learn if you're not applying what you're learning, right? And so, yes, all of that learning is cool in theory. That's really, really great. But if you can't take what you're learning and then apply it, what's the point? Cool, personal development. Love it. Big fan. But if your goal here is to build something and to grow and to like change the world, if you put whatever you're making on such a pedestal, if you don't start small and then iterate from there through failure, then that it's not going to be anywhere. We call it waterfall versus agile methodology of building something. Waterfall is where you create the whole idea, you put it on a pedestal, and you say, we're going to execute that whole thing, right? The whole thing, waterfall, right? Got the big thing up top, and then you slowly build it from the bottom up, right? That is inflexible, right? It's very structured, it's very rigid. Agile is build something small, very tiny, that shows the value to the market. What are you making and how is it different? Right? You do that, you build that small little thing, and then you immediately get feedback from your audience. The whole thing is you might be wrong. Your thing might be wrong. And I think that type of failure, that is so scary for so many people because they've put their identity wrapped up inside of this idea that they think is perfect, that they're so excited about, right? And what if they execute on it and it actually isn't good? That's so scary to so many people, and I get it. So you got to find who you are outside of the context of what you're building. You got to find who you are outside the context of what you're learning. You are a whole human being. And I feel really bad for people that get stuck in that. Well, what if I fail? Well, what if it's bad? Move on to the other idea. You have so many. You have so many ideas, like move on to the next. It's no problem. Learn all you can. That's great. And then go and apply it, right? But don't learn so much that you put your idea on such a pedestal that you can't tackle it. Don't do that. Start small. That's I guess my takeaway from like people who think that perfection is the thing and it's not. It's not. The process is the thing.
Patrick, for our listeners, we always like to offer a gentle neuroalchemy invitation from all the guests that come on the show. For someone who's learning something new or maybe they're feeling stuck, what's something that's maybe a simple actionable item, a simple experiment, or a mindset shift that you would like to invite them to try every day over the next 7 days to improve all the things?
All the things, right? I would say, I mean, honestly, if you're getting stuck and you're like, I don't know where to go, what to do. The major thing that you can try to do is failure, is get yourself into an environment where you're constantly failing. It's exposure therapy, right? And if we can destigmatize internally, if we can somehow regulate our emotions when we're messing up constantly, then I think that is something that is valuable, extremely valuable. To learn is to fail. To fail is to learn. And so find a way to get yourself to fail 10 to 15 times a day, right? Do that because then through exposure therapy, after a couple of weeks, it's not going to feel so bad at the end of that couple of weeks. You will have failed. How many times is that? What is that? 7 times 10, right? 70, and then times that by 4, whatever that may be. You failed 300 times, 200 times, something like that, right? I'm not the best at math. But that's the whole point. Is like, get yourself into a situation where you're messing up. But the enjoyment of the process of doing is really, really cool to you, right? Regardless of if you're messing up. Find what that thing is for you and do that. That would be my advice.
I have to tell my clients it literally, and this is really true if you really think about it, if you're trying to learn a new skill or you're like trying to grow in some way, screwing up does not matter the exact moment you get it correct. The
Yeah.
exact moment that you get it right or you understand it or whatever it is, every single mistake that you made before that point, they literally disappear.
Yeah.
They literally disappear. They don't even exist anymore, right? But we put all of our attention on those mistakes and the fear of making those mistakes. Like, forget about that. Just
Yeah.
keep going until you hit your mark, the one you set.
It's so difficult, though, because it is so ingrained in us to fear failure or to fear, like fear itself, right? Fear itself is so much more powerful than love or connection or growth. And it makes sense biologically. We hear something in the forest sitting by a fire that we can't see. We hear it, we've never heard it before. We're afraid of the unknown and we run the other way. Who knows? 30% of the time, that thing was probably trying to eat you, sure. But you've run away from it as self-preservation. The fear of the unknown, the fear of failure, it's kind of the same thing hand in hand when you talk about the biology and the physical manifestation of that inside of us. Our adrenaline spikes, we stop breathing, we're afraid, right? And either we, what is it? Fight, flight, or freeze. Either we do those 3 things. It's not, that is how we have learned as a species. It really, really is. But the physical manifestation of that is so intense for us in the modern day that it's so hard to overcome. It really, really is. So it's admirable if you're trying to tackle this. It really, really is. And keep it up, people. Really, really do. It's a hard thing to do, and it's extremely admirable.
There's always ways to grow. There's always ways to use those, those stumbling blocks and turn them into stepping stones. As we begin to close, what do you most hope listeners walk away remembering about themselves, their capacity to learn, and their relationship with failure?
Everybody is capable of learning. Everybody is capable of executing. You think you're not the right person to get into a learning process like that? Okay, I understand. I really get it. It is truly a biological response, and you're so afraid of failure that like you clam up. I totally get it. Again, it's such a biological response. Try your best to find situations where you are failing. It's brave. We know. It's hard. We know. But if you can start small and fail incrementally, just tiny little bits of failure, and something that you're really enjoying doing. The process of doing is the thing that is really enjoyable for you, where failure is just so intrinsically a part of it. Find whatever that is for you and move forward through that. And slowly but surely, failure is just going to be a part of daily life for you. And that is good because you're growing and learning and you're changing and adapting. It's such a more fulfilling life if you can live that way. So I challenge you to, through exposure therapy, find that process, whatever that is for you. Find it and do it.
Patrick, thank you for such a thoughtful, expansive, and encouraging conversation. Your work is a powerful reminder that learning doesn't require perfection. It does require presence, curiosity, and safety. For all of us out there, I will include that challenge he gave you in the show notes and any links that he gives me after we finish up today. I will include those there as well. Before we close, I want to name something. I never leave these conversations unchanged. There's always something I'm taking with me, something that I'll reflect on, and something I'll continue integrating long after the recording stops. And if this episode resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it. That's how these conversations travel, and it's how they reach the people who need to hear them the most. Until next time, this is Dr. Sarah, and this is Neuroalchemy. Take gentle care of your mind, your body, and your creative inner world. You're allowed to learn. You're allowed to make mistakes. You are becoming. Bye for now.